So it looks like it's time to begin. All right. Should be popping up any moment now. Save for the big reveal. So tonight we're going to be talking about, are there extraterrestrials, and is this consistent with the biblical worldview? I bet you were pretty surprised about having this talked about at church, but it is a Bible-related topic. And that's because this is something that the Bible doesn't speak directly on. The foundations of it, the Bible does speak on. That's because evolution leads to ETs. So according to the theory of evolution, if life appeared from natural processes on Earth, like a random planet, so Earth would just be a random planet, then it is likely that life appeared on the trillions and trillions of likely other planets out there that are able to support life. And if the Earth is only about 4 billion years old and the universe is 13.5 billion years old, remember, according to the theory of evolution, then these other planets or civilizations are likely billions of years more advanced than we are. And that means that if these civilizations are more advanced than we are, then they are likely able to travel through space to other locations, including Earth, or at the very least make contact via light speed transmission through space. And that is why most people today think there is life on other planets. Because for the last 2 centuries, our culture, Western civilization, has been steeped in the idea of evolution. And if it happened here, then it can happen somewhere else. And nowadays, even Christians, according to a number of creation surveys, do support the idea of extraterrestrial life. But is it a biblical idea? Now, as far as the idea of extraterrestrial life, there are 2 main components. Those that think that extraterrestrials are here, basically those that believe that UFOs are extraterrestrials, or those that are more academic that think life is out there, but we haven't made contact in any sort, form, or way. Now, the Bible does speak upon a number of things, and when we use them for their primary purpose, their primary focus, it doesn't speak on extraterrestrials. But if we look at what it says and then look at what that means, we can glean quite a bit of information about, is there life other places in our universe? The big question, though, is if you believe that there are extraterrestrials, you have to ask, then do these intelligent beings possess a soul or a spirit, and are they in need of salvation? That is the next logical conclusion as far as what to ask if you believe there are extraterrestrials and also the Bible. Now, from Scripture, we know that man was given dominion over the earth. Now, if extraterrestrials were coming to Earth in these spaceships that were able to travel interstellarly, then they would have technology vastly advanced compared to us, and therefore we could not have dominion if they are more powerful. That is one component there. The other component that you have to think of is that creation itself is under the bondage of decay, the bondage of sin. So if God created life, we're assuming that, okay, it didn't evolve other places, but God created other places, then those places would also be affected by Adam's curse. And if God came to earth to redeem mankind back to himself, Jesus Christ, and we know that he is our kinsman redeemer from Isaiah 59, that means that he only came to save humans. We know Christ did not come to save animals, plants, bacteria, or even the rocks. He only came to save those descendants of Adam. So that means that these hypothetical aliens cannot be saved because they are not descendants of Adam. And we know that Christ is the husband of the church. The church is Christ's bride. Now, this is a metaphor, but for that metaphor to hold true, that means there can only be one church. And we know that here among humans, there is only one true church. But that means that aliens, since they are not related to Adam, cannot be part of this one church, nor can they have their own church, because Christ only has one wife, according to this metaphor. He's not going to have a lot of brides throughout the universe. Not going to have one bride for this planet, one bride for this planet, one bride for this planet. And we know that Christ died once. He's not going to, after he came to earth, go to Alpha Centauri B and die there for those people, then go over to that planet and die for those people. And before he came here, he didn't do the same thing. He died once for all. And we know that all there means those descendants of Adam. And we know that this creation is not long for this world. We know, well, it's not long for existence, I should say. But everything will be destroyed by fire and fervent heat. So all this summed up means that aliens who have been affected by the curse through no fault of their own, who cannot be saved because they're not related to Adam, and would be then destroyed when everything else is destroyed, meaning that they're living in a sin-cursed world, will suffer and die and cannot be saved. This doesn't fit well with what the Bible tells us. Or if you say that it does, then it changes your idea of what God is, who God is. So the redemption of mankind, a very narrow, focused view of it. Adam rebelled against God, sin and death entered the world, and we, all being descendants from Adam and Eve, have that ability to know right from wrong, and thus are susceptible to sin. And that sin is a barrier that prevents man from being right with God. Christ, our blood relative through Adam, redeemed us and connected us with God because he died once for all. So this is just a very narrow view of that. Now, ETs, again, not being blood relatives. And again, Christ died once for all. He's not dying for each individual intelligent race, meaning that they have to suffer the effects of sin despite potentially never having sinned. These create a lot of questions. Now, while this doesn't prevent the idea of ETs being compatible with the biblical worldview, because we are taking what the scripture says and not using it for its primary purpose. We're taking it to the next logical step. So there is some inference of man in this. So there is a chance that it could be mistaken, because he's not speaking on this. When he's speaking about it, he's speaking about subject A, but we're then taking it to the next step, what that means. But another way of looking at this is why God created. God created the earth to be inhabited. He formed the earth and fashioned it. He established it. He did not create it to be empty, but formed it to be inhabited. Isaiah 54. The heavens and the stars he uses other purposes. One, to declare his glory. Two, one, we know that he made it and he has control of it. He did not make it for us. God gave care of the earth to man, but the heavens are the Lord's. And three, in Genesis 1, when he's actually making all these stars, and by stars there, it means all heavenly bodies. Anything that gives off light is a star here. That is made to distinguish between the day and night, and let them be signs to mark the seasons and days of years, and let them serve as lights in the expanse of the sky to shine upon the earth. He made these lights not to be inhabited, but to give light upon the earth. Now again, you could argue that there's a separate purpose for that, but you cannot assume that. You cannot assume that, and so therefore the most simplest interpretation of all this would be that there's nothing out there living. Those are there simply to declare God's glory, to give light upon the earth, and for us to use as symbols of measurements of time. Now again, this does have some intellectual arguments in there. This does have some steps that we are inferring with our own understanding, because it is not speaking directly about what else is out there. It is just giving the purpose. So there could be other ones that he's not mentioning, but we cannot assume that. Now, for the rest of this, we're going to be approaching it from a more scientific, since this is basically all that the Bible says directly, or at least as directly as it can, about this. So the first, we're going to approach it from the academic. Is there life out there, but there's never been any contact? What is the likelihood of life being out there in general? This is the approach that NASA uses. NASA does not support anything as far as aliens, ET, or whatever, coming to Earth or making contact in any way. Yet they use the idea of life being out there as a strong motivation for budget. They have used it since, for the last 3 decades to strongly gain government funding, because that is what our culture is steeped in, and they use that to their advantage. We also have SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. This is one of many organizations that are searching the stars, searching for signals. And they have found signals. This one here, the first one, was a pulsar star that was later called LGM-1, Little Green Man 1, because it was emitting a pulse every 1 1/3 second, very, very consistent. And they first thought it was a message, but later realized that this is just a natural phenomenon, that the star was giving off radiation, happens to be directly at Earth, every 1 1/3 second. Now, they do not hold that there are aliens around us, that they are coming here in UFOs and all that, nor can they support that there's any kind of evidence for them outside. They have not gained any signal despite over 60 years of searching and a large number of projects. Over 60 projects are scanning the night sky. And you can actually let them borrow some of your CPU's processor to start to churn this data if you like. Not that I'm recommending that. But there are a large number of stars. They think that since there's so many stars out there and evolution happened here, that it has to have happened somewhere else. Our galaxy alone has 400 billion potential stars, and there's billions of other galaxies. And they have found extrasolar planets. You will frequently hear news about a supposed Earth-like planet or this or that. They detect them by one of two methods usually. Either a direct detected orbital wobble method, where they're seeing its effect on their star, similar to how Jupiter affects our sun, or a transit method, meaning that the planet passes between the star and Earth, blocking the light. Now, all these planets are quite large, simply because that is the best way to detect them. The bigger they are, the easier they are to detect. Most of them, though, are over 200 the size of Jupiter. Many, many times larger than what can support life as we know it. Horrible gravity, many of which are too hot or too highly elliptical, meaning that their orbits will cause too many variations that life cannot support there. We have not found any extra or outside of our solar system planets that can potentially even support life. So again, no evidence. Unfortunately, I can't really go much further into detail because there's not anything to discuss, at least as far as this academic approach. To sum it up, it is what is called the Fermi paradox. This was put forward by 1950s Nobel Prize winner Enrico Fermi. Now, it puts all the weight on the argument that there must be life out there by saying that if the universe is 8 billion years older than Earth, let's say it took 7 billion years for life to evolve to the point where it could produce space-age civilizations. So 1 billion years from that civilization to the creation of Earth and the evolutionary model. Now let's say it took 1 million years for that civilization to get to the point where they could make one colony, one spaceship that could go to another planet and colonize it. And then after that 1 million years, that gets there and they build up, then each planet now, those two planets, have 1 million years to produce another single colony ship to go to another planet. And this process repeats. After 1 billion years, you would have 1 to the 10 to the 30th power, basically 1 with 30 zeros behind it, number of planets with this civilization on it. Basically, where is everybody at? Because it's just one civilization in a relatively short period of time, according to the evolutionary model. We should be tripping over everybody. Now, there are many solutions, hundreds of solutions put forward. One is that we are simply banging drums, like in the jungle, expecting somebody else to return drum signals. But they're using a more high-tech civilization or technology, and we can't detect them. It works for one single civilization, but there should be many, many, many civilizations everywhere because evolution is happening everywhere all the time. But since there are hundreds and hundreds of solutions, you might think that one of them must be right. There's a lot of solutions out there, so good chance that one of them is accurate. It's actually the reverse. Because if you have one theory to fit a solution, good chance that theory is at least close, or you have a good idea, because it is better than everything else as far as the theories go. If you have a handful, good chance that one of them is kind of close, but you're not quite there. You need more information to narrow it down from 4 to 1. If you have hundreds, that means you don't know any idea, don't have any clue about what's going on. Because if there was one accurate solution in there, one accurate theory, it has nothing going for it that would distinguish it from all the other inaccurate ones, meaning that there's nothing going for it at all. So this is a big problem for life being out there, life being evolving in other planets, because there basically is no evidence for it. And that's a big problem, especially since you can go and get a PhD in a field that has no evidence in it. Exobiology is a field, a specialization with no evidence in it, because it is about life outside the solar system. So for the rest of the lesson, we'll be focusing on basically UFOs. Are UFOs real? Do they mean that there is extraterrestrial life? And is that consistent with what the Bible says? This here is actually the first flying saucer. You might be surprised because it doesn't look like a saucer. The description actually wasn't what they looked like, but how they were actually skipping along, like saucers on water. This is obviously not a picture, but a picture of a drawing, I guess. There are a number of problems with ETs coming to Earth from other planets. One is the distance. A light year, the distance that light travels in a single year, is about 5 trillion miles. And these are all, as far as I can tell, accurate pictures of events of UFOs. And when I say UFO, I do not mean a spaceship. I mean unidentified phenomenon, or UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomenon, as the new acronym is trying to be called. But I use UFO just because most of you probably don't know what a UAP is by that acronym. But according to Einstein's theory of special relativity, the speed of light is the maximum possible speed, meaning that something that is 100,000 light years away will take 100,000 years to get there at the speed of light. And you can see things are still not that close, even at the speed of light. But that's not including all the travel time, because you have to speed up and slow down. You can't instantaneously go to the speed of light like light can, nor can you instantly stop like light can. Or you can, but it wouldn't be good. So we got to take that into consideration. We also have to take into consideration that we don't have really a good spacecraft for all that. The NASA space shuttle is probably the best craft known to man. It can accelerate to the speed of 17,000 miles per hour in 8 minutes. That's pretty good, because that's what they need to get outside of Earth's orbit. That engine weighs about 1/7 as much as a train engine, but produces about 39 times the amount of power. The pump that puts the fuel to where it needs to go is so powerful it can drain a family-sized swimming pool in 25 seconds. Don't get near it. And the heat energy, if converted to electricity for 2 minutes only, would produce enough energy to power 87,000 homes for a full day. And this is the best we can do. This is the best that has been thought up. You may have thought that, oh, there's solar cells, there's the Star Trek Enterprise, there's all these other things that could be used. They're all theoretical. There's no evidence to support them. Potentially some good ideas, but again, there is no solid evidence that they would work. Another problem is the energy. The closer we get to the speed of light, the less time passes for the person on that spaceship, which is good because a 100,000 light year voyage would be near instantaneous. Now, what's not so good is that the closer to the speed of light you get, the higher your mass gets, up to infinity. Don't get on the scale when you're on your trip, basically. And that's a problem for the energy required, because the more mass, the more energy you have to move that mass. To get to 50% the speed of light in the space shuttle, it would take 23 million atomic bombs. And while we have quite a few atomic bombs nowadays, perhaps too many in your opinion, perhaps my opinion, we don't have nearly enough for that. And the closer you get to the speed of light, the more you'll need. Look, it's almost 3 times when it should be less than twice. But because it is exponential, our mass is increasing to infinity, we're going to need more and more for every percentage. And then you have to double it because you have to slow down, or quadruple it if you want to come back. There's a lot of energy requirements that we have no idea how this is going to work. It doesn't seem physically possible. But say you get all those taken care of, you still have to worry about collisions. Space is not empty. It's near empty, but not empty. There's estimated about 10,000 dust particles per cubic kilometer of space. And you may think that's not much. You probably have more on the shelf that you don't clean. But that's quite a bit. At 1/10 the speed of light, impacting that dust would be equivalent to 10 tons of TNT. If it's pea-sized at 50% the speed of light, that's 2.2 atomic bombs. Many of you may remember the Space Shuttle Challenger in 1983. It was hit by a paint chip going nowhere near the speed of light, and a paint chip caused a small crater in the front window. Those are very strong panels of glass. Now, many will try to say, oh, there have been force fields, deflector shields. I'm sure Eric is thinking of all the Star Trek things they use. But that just further increases your amount of energy that you need, even if you can think of ways to use these. Because for every pea-sized piece of debris that you hit, you need 2.2 atomic bombs worth of energy. Again, crazy amounts. Now, this has led to a new hypothesis for all these UAP, UFO things. And that is called the interdimensional hypothesis. This recently gained notoriety because of Jacques Vallée, I'm assuming I'm pronouncing that right, and now is one of the most favored. but it is outside our ability to test scientifically. Now, it is only better than the travel in two ways. One, since we don't know anything about interdimensional travel, even if it's possible, we can't say what the problems are with interdimensional travel like we can with interstellar travel. The other thing is that the little evidence that we do have with monitoring these sightings, it does seem to fit more so with what people are telling us. And we'll get into that here in a bit. But this also says that aliens claim to have evolved to a higher, almost spiritual state. You might see some of this in some frequent sci-fi references, some sci-fi shows like Stargate SG-1. This has it in that. And this has become very common, very popular among ufologists because of its religious appeal. You will find that the UFO movement and New Age religion is very tightly linked, as well as a number of other religions. Well, with all that, all these problems, what are people seeing? Well, unfortunately, or fortunately if you like sci-fi, I guess, we lived in a sci-fi alien-rich culture. I'm not saying that aliens are amongst us or anything, that the politicians are reptiles or whatnot. I'm saying that the idea of aliens is just so saturated in our culture that you will have tons of TV shows with it, and I mean, we have a sci-fi channel. I mean, that's just coming all with it. But this all started about 2 centuries ago. H.G. Wells is probably one of the most notable first sci-fi writers. There are definitely others. He was a student underneath Thomas Huxley, Darwin's bulldog, and he used the theory of evolution to bash Christianity, same as Darwin, as Thomas Huxley, I mean. Well, he wrote The War of the Worlds and many other sci-fi novels. A little bit later, we have Orson Welles, no relation. He did a War of the Worlds broadcast. Now, he did give a disclaimer when he started, but he didn't give another one for 40 minutes. Intentional or unintentional, I don't know. But it had a very large effect. Maybe the one he wanted, maybe not. But people fled their homes, took up arms, thousands of police were called, and even the National Guard was mobilized. All because Martians invaded, and the government was powerless to stop it, or so the broadcast went. The question is why was this such a strong response, even at this time? Because this was at a time where there weren't numerous UFO sightings. You don't hear about it in the news at this time. We didn't have rocket ships or jet aircraft. And in spite of all this, people completely believed. Now, it may be the Nazi threat of World War II or the dawn of mass media or some other effect, but there was a strong effect with the culture even then. Well, after that, we have Isaac Asimov, a very well-known sci-fi writer. He made the 3 laws of robotics that I'm sure some of you know of. He was a very proud atheist and very vocal about his own religious views. Well, after that, it still was a very hot simmer on our culture. But the 1977 came, and if you have watched anything sci-fi related now, it is because of this movie here. Star Wars blew everything out of the water, and because of that, we have our sci-fi rich culture. Thank you, George Lucas. But we do live in a sci-fi rich culture. Aliens are there whether we want to look at it or not because we are putting it in front of ourselves. Now, this may be that people are simply having all this in their mind, and so they are seeing things and think, oh, it must be aliens. And a good 90 to 95% of reported UFOs are later identified. Now, these are according to certain research organizations like Project Blue Book and so on. But that leaves 10 to 5% unidentified. What you may find kind of funny or ironic, your pick, is that 27% of the sightings appear to be the planet Venus, just like Agent K said. Now, there are many other mistaken identities, such as satellites circling or burning up upon re-entry. Starlink, Elon Musk's internet, probably doesn't help with this. Meteors, rocket launches, space shuttles, high and low altitude weather balloons, northern lights, and other astronomical phenomena such as ball lightning. So many, many things that people can see in the sky, and if you already have aliens in the mind, you could be thinking aliens. In fact, the very first death related to UFOs was due to a weather balloon. Again, Agent K was right. So this is Project Skyhook, It is referred to as the Mantell incident. A pilot saw a very unusual thing in the sky. He flew towards it, he radioed in, and then silence. Later, his body was found crashed. Well, you will still see this reported today as a confirmed case of a UFO death. And aliens killed him. But what really happened is that this flew way up too high, as weather balloons do. He could not breathe, and then he basically passed out and then crashed. Not a pleasant experience by any means, but still, it is one that is mistaken even today. But there are many other CIA and YouTube programs that have been released through the years that have later been connected, one through Project Blue Book, to reported UFO sightings. And there's many, many others. But all this still leaves the 5 to 10% unidentified. Now, if you are for ETs being UFOs, then you'll say that since we can't identify them, they must be extraterrestrials or paranormal phenomenon. Or if you're a skeptic, you're going to say, well, since all the others were identified, then that means that these probably just weren't identified from lack of data. Therefore, there's no ETs. But we don't have evidence, so we can't say for sure either way. Now, sure, some of them would be solved, but we can't say all. So how else can we look at these things? We can't get a lot of evidence because we weren't there. Well, we can look at the pattern. Believe it or not, there is a pattern to UFO sightings, the unidentified ones even. In the 1949 to about the next 2 decades, they appeared most commonly as disc-like objects or rocket-like, cigar-like objects, as well as luminous objects in the night sky. After the 1980s, they changed to be more triangular or cone-shaped. It even seemed to be boomerang-shaped. As the Wall Street Journal says in 1990, there was 26,000 sightings of triangular UFOs in Belgium in 1989. And the more we have come to the modern day, the more photographic evidence that we've had. Even the Phoenix Lights and the Mexico City 1992 or 1993 event has thousands of videotapes. Very, very confusing stuff, despite having many, many angles on it. A lot of data, yet no known solution. These crafts are seen morphing, disappearing, reappearing, and seeming to be slipping in and out of reality. This is one of the reasons why the interdimensional hypothesis has become a favorite in the UFO circles. And they have been seen not only in recent decades, but throughout all of time and all over the world. India, China, Japan, England, France, Italy, Scandinavia, and Polynesia. Ancient Romans and Greeks have stories of fiery globes and flying shields. Alexander the Great even claimed to see a flying shield attack his army. The Egyptians have accounts of circles of fire, flaming chariots. The the American Indians have legends of flying canoes and great silvery ships, many of these containing occupants. These accounts seem to have the technology available at their time, while our accounts today have the technology we expect to see due to sci-fi. Now, some of these today have been seen on radar by multiple credible witnesses, military personnel, people that have nothing to gain from their reports. These ships, or whatever they are, appear to materialize and dematerialize, perform aerial maneuvers that defy the laws of physics, change shape and merge into one another, cause electrical disturbances, power outages, spooking of animals, and all without making any noise. This is purely a visual phenomenon, it seems, that has effects on other things. And what is very, very interesting is that there is no evidence yet that any of these crafts, beings, whatever they are, originate from outer space. They have never had a radar sample, signal, photograph, video, report from a human eyewitness of these coming in from outer space into the Earth. Plenty going the other way, but not coming in. These aliens seem to be able to live and breathe in Earth conditions without aid. They have been fired upon by Americans, Russian, and Canadian pilots, believe it or not. They did not say sorry, the Canadians. But yet, none of them have been brought down. And on different occasions, no two UFOs sighted appear exactly alike. They're kind of like snowflakes in that. And they have been increasing as far as their effect. So much so that they've had to change the close encounters classification system to CE4 and CE5. Close encounters of the fourth kind, basically, or third kind, if that movie reminds you of anything. Now, a fourth kind is experience related to kidnapping or abduction of victims. C5 is contact initiated by human beings via methods such as telepathy or walk-ins, where individuals will open themselves up to a foreign entity they claim is extraterrestrial in order to see things, do writing, remote viewing, or to speak to people around them. And they even go so far as to teach other people how to do it. Now, there is no uncontested physical evidence that has ever been found for UFO sightings. Now, there are some that are difficult to explain. Scorch marks, depressions on the ground, burnt or damaged plants that take a lot longer to heal than normal. Crop circles, though, we know that they are man-made because the people that made them came forward and even debunked a lot of people that said they could tell the difference between man-made ones and not. No difference. You can even pay for people to come out to your field and do crop circle logos. They are called circle makers. I wouldn't recommend doing that because that organization has had some occultic connections, and unfortunately, even though man makes these, UFO sightings tend to collect where people have made these. Later on, people will report seeing things. There's also electromagnetic disturbances that's hard to explain away, physical evidence on humans and animals, dizziness, headaches, various pains, nauseas, etc. And some government officials will even claim that they have interacted with nuclear launch codes. And that's not all the patterns that we see, because when we're looking specifically at the fourth kind, the abductee reports also have a pattern. In general, the abductors report of a warning of bad things to come if we don't change our ways. And there is a slight implication, or just a flat out telling the individual that they are chosen. There's a vaguely medical-like examination that is near torturous in some cases, or bordering on sodomy, or fulfilling that. Most people need to require hypnosis to recall most or all of the events of the abduction. And hypnosis is a very suspect way of recalling things. You can actually get a person under hypnosis to begin to remember false memories. And people have been implanted with memories of being abused as a child so strong that they believe it was accurate. It's pretty, I don't know if amazing is the right word, but terrifying potentially, what people can do with simple tricks of hypnosis. But there have been accurate recalls of memories that have been previously forgotten. There is also a general consensus of missing time, whether that's minutes or hours, among the abductee. Now, as far as the message goes, there's a general denial of Christ in the Bible or a reshaping of Christian traditional views in their messages. The general pattern goes a capture, examination, there may be a conference or a tour of the ship. They may have an otherworldly journey or a theophany, meaning that they meet with some religious figure, whether that is Buddha, Muhammad, the Pope, even things reporting to be Jesus Christ. They then return, and they do have an aftermath. This does affect their lives. These abductors appear to be able to alter the perceptions of reality of these individuals. They can control what the abductee sees. They appear in a number of guises and shapes. The abductee may receive marks or wounds on their bodies. Women frequently suffer serious gynecological problems such as cysts, tumors, or cancers. They can have very serious sudden illnesses, leading to surgery, debilitation, even death that the doctors can't identify. They may come in contact with more than one type of alien, and they will frequently be visited multiple times. These experiences are very painful, and it even can affect multiple people in a household, even children. They have been interviewing people, and it is not uncommon for a child who has no connection with the parent having similar events that they will tell people about. These people are experiencing something. This person here, Donnie Higbee, reports, "I noticed a drastic change in the attitudes of several of the abductees from one meeting to the next. People who had been traumatized all their lives by ongoing abductions and had only anger and mistrust for their non-human abductors suddenly started saying that they had been told or shown that everything that has been happening to them was for their own good, and that the abductors are highly spiritual beings and are helping them, the abductee, to evolve spiritually. By accepting this information, the abductee stopped fighting abduction and instead became passive and controlled. When I checked with other researchers, I found that this was a pattern that was repeating itself over and over again around the country. I became concerned that the abductees were accepting these explanations from entities that we know can be deceitful. At first, they seemed to exhibit some sort of PTSD kind of signs, and later signs similar of Stockholm Syndrome. And these two individuals here were one of the first abductees. They claimed that, or other people have claimed that their abduction was due to their interracial marriage, because this was back in the 1960s or 1950s. Yet they have both very similar accounts. They have missing time, and while there was a slight difference on their description of a nose or not, I believe, otherwise they did have a lot of problems later on. Now, the pattern as far as the individuals being abducted, most abductees in the past have dabbled in the occult, even on a relatively minor basis. But what is especially interesting is that Christians seem to be absent from this group. And I don't mean people that claim to be Christian. I mean Christian fundamentalists, walk the walk kind of Christians. They seem to be completely absent from this group of individuals. Now, if this was simple UFO culture integrating, maybe it's because Christians don't watch as many UFO shows. I know I have, so it wasn't fit for me, but perhaps that's it. But maybe it's something else. There have even been accounts of abduction experiences stopping by the individual pleading out to Jesus for this to stop. You can see interviews with people, they are emotionally upset about this. They are being, according to their story, their events, that they are being emotionally, physically abused, hurtfully so. Yet, randomly, it seems, they call out to Jesus and it stops. And these people are, again, not Christians. They are not followers of Christ. They maybe have heard of the Bible, maybe have read it a little bit, but they are not come to church every Sunday kind of Christians. And this organization, CE4, when they first came across this, they began to look at other interviewers, other researchers, and it became a very, very common experience. Even Gary Bates, who works with Creation.com, has personally interviewed hundreds of people that have seen things and dozens of people that have claimed abductions. These people are being damaged by something. It is not right for us to simply dismiss their experiences. Now, I'm not saying to accept that it's ET or anything like that, but these people are experiencing something. Now, some will try to say that this is a psychosocial theory, like a birth trauma, basically, but there's not a lot of evidence to support this scientifically. It could be sleep paralysis. I have experienced sleep paralysis. It is a very realistic experience. Thankfully, mine was so comical that I knew it wasn't real, because I was lying in bed. I was suddenly paralyzed and couldn't move and heard something out in my hallway. And then around the door walks a neon pink, glowing, fuzzy sweater talking in a Valley Girl accent like she's on the phone. I was scared, confused, but thankfully realized that it was basically a dream, because I was relatively young at this point. But it was a terrifying experience, especially if it seemed at the least bit realistic, as far as something that I could see actually happening. And 50% of abduction cases could explain this, or could be explained by this. But it fails to account for the in-depth, fine details of interactions, especially between multiple peoples having a similar abduction event. Also, because we are seeing this around the globe with very similar patterns. What is very interesting is that a lot of the accounts give these abductors characteristics that are similar to what we see in the Bible as spiritual beings. Spiritual beings from the Bible we see can appear as human, male men when doing God's bidding. They have names, they have classifications, they have ranks, and they are more powerful than mankind. They can appear, interact, and even kill humans on occasion. They can appear so real that humans may not recognize them as angels. They are not to be worshipped. They can, indwell or possess an individual and take over to such an extent that they could mutilate the individual. Now we know that not all of these accounts in the Bible are good spiritual beings, angels of God. But most of these accounts are. So, again, this is simply trying to get an idea of the spiritual realm, which the Bible is not telling us directly about. It's not its main purpose. Its purpose is how to be saved. But it does give us details, little pieces of information, and it does seem to match what people are seeing, people are experiencing. There is a spiritual world out there that does affect us. We see this a lot in the minor prophets of the Old Testament, minor only in the size of their books. There is a spiritual world that has an effect on our physical world, and we as modern humans, modern Americans, tend to try to downplay this. The question is how much of an effect? Now these messages, these messengers, this is again back to the abductors, use false appearances. They pretend to be the good guys, saying, I'm here to help you. They say that humans can potentially reach the level of godhood. And they convince people by telling them histories, their own history basically, things that only the abductee can know. They use names that are common both to pagan deities and also common among separate abductor stories, abductor accounts. They claim they can know and tell the future, yet nothing has ever come true that they have reported. These messages are noticeably intolerant of biblical Christianity. They will often claim that Jesus was not the savior of mankind, but just a fellow UFO not like them. Yet there is no constant consensus among abductor accounts. The message that they give to different individuals are different. But we have had historical accounts of people claiming to get extra-worldly gospels. Joseph Smith, Muhammad, and the Church of Scientology, just to name a few. There are many, many, many cults that do it as well. Now, I'm not here to tell you what these things are. Because honestly, I don't know. There's a lot we don't know, and this is one of the ones I don't. Basically, it is two things. No, I guess three. Be careful about the idea that life is out there, because it does not seem to be biblically consistent. Two, we need to make sure we don't deny these people's experiences if you do happen to come across these individuals. There are many that claim to have such accounts. But we need to make sure that we are talking with them about it, because they did experience something. What it is, who knows? But they experienced something that gave them a false gospel, potentially. We need to deny the message. Now, it is very almost intriguing, exciting to get into some of this unknown stuff, but I would caution you before getting into it. Make sure that you're not doing this the same way you wouldn't get into the occultic stuff, because there is a very strong overlap between these two subjects. Occultic practices, rituals, are very, very closely related to UFOs and other such things. Here are a number of resources that you can look into, creation.com and Answers in Genesis. I'm sorry for that misspelling there, that escaped my notice. But again, those two organizations have a lot of good resources, as well as a few of the others on the page here. Perhaps not the best class to end on, but it wasn't my primary intention, but at least you now have this information. I know there's probably a lot of questions, so if you have any burning comments, questions, let me know now, otherwise you can always talk with me later. But I hope this overall course has been enlightening and giving you resources to be able to talk with people, or at least be more apt to talk with people about all things, well, worldly, because everything that the Bible speaks on, even the worldly, earthly things, can be then used to bring people back to the spiritual things, to Christ. Otherwise, any other questions, comments?
I heard a gentleman, he was a preacher who became a Christian after he immigrated over from England to the United States. But before that, in England, he was a spiritualist. And deep in a spiritualist church and like that. And they would have seances for people who wanted to talk to their dead mother or father or whatever and like that. And they would call them back from the dead. Well, he found out in a terrifying way, as well as others, that these were actually demons that were coming into people's body, possessing them, and speaking for that relative. But they weren't really speaking to the relative. They were speaking to demons who knew these people intimately. And that sometimes they would do different things in the room. Like if there was a Bible out, they'd throw that Bible across the room. And you couldn't tell. So there were people there being possessed and demonized at the same time. And he would tell also about sometimes, he wouldn't tell all the stories because they were just too terrific and too terrible to mention, but he'd talk about ectoplasm coming out people's ears or nose or whatever and forming up and making an image that people could see. And it was very crazy. And but he got out of church when, of course, when he became a Christian in the United States. He used to go around churches and talk on all of this. And of course, he had gone to Bible college and studied on that too. And he used to, I don't know if he's still alive now, he used to have a website called Spotlight on Satan. And many times he was threatened with his life if he didn't shut up.
There's a lot of just all kinds of stuff that you can't explain scientifically, and it's dark, it's dangerous stuff, yeah.
Ephesians 6:12, it makes me think of some of these UFOs that are in atmosphere are probably put up there by demonic forces.
It's definitely a possibility, yeah.
Starting a false religion.
Yeah, so that would just be careful about what you get into, even as a potentially fun pastime. Just to, like kids do sometimes, they get together and do what would be stupid things. I wouldn't recommend doing anything like this, yeah.
Well, and a lot of those descriptions you have on the last 30 of your slides describing some of the people's illnesses and other things, it sounded like what the spiritualists saw when he was over in England.
It's a strong overlap, yeah.
Very.
Yeah. Any other comments or questions? All right.
I guess I have one.
Sure.
Leviticus 19:31 says, "Give no regard to mediums and familiar spirits. Do not seek after them to be defiled by them. I am the Lord your God." So I think the takeaway here is sometimes we find what we're looking for, even when we don't know what we're looking for. We're looking for strange, exciting, weird stuff. We may find strange, weird stuff that ends up being much less fulfilling than we hoped it would be. And God's advice is, don't go there. Yeah, there's dangerous stuff. Don't go there. Be careful. Isaiah 8:19 says, "And when you say to them, seek those who are mediums and wizards who whisper and mutter, should not a people seek their God? Should they seek the dead on behalf of the living?" We have access to the mind and the spirit of the most powerful being in any place, not just in the universe, but in the spiritual world as well. And we know the things he has shown us are true. We can rely on it. If we're drawing near to him, he will draw near to us. We'll be in a safe place. If we resist the devil, he will flee from us. And that's where we need to make sure we're keeping our being.
We have something that is far more powerful, far more helpful, and far more nice to us at the very least.
What scripture was that? The second one was Isaiah 8:19.
Isaiah 8:19 for those at home.
The first one is Leviticus 19:31.
And Leviticus 19:31, again for those online at home.
Yeah, 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, verse 3, where it says, "But the Lord is faithful, and he will strengthen and protect you from the evil."
What was that verse again?
2 Thessalonians chapter 3, verse 3.
2 Thessalonians chapter 3, verse 3. Again for those at home, I'll just let you guys look that up. All right.
Good verse.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Very good comments. And again, I'm happy to talk with everybody, but for time's sake, I'm going to step off. Thank you.